It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Tuesday, first day after the election. I lost the chat about here today. Thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, hey, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well. We are going to try to squeeze as much in as we possibly can here today. Kelvin Heppner will be with me in a second here to talk about last night's election result. We got Ivor Bernatsky with Lemken and a product spotlight. Make sure you go to lemkendemo.com. We're going to talk about that. Also, we've got part 3 in our continuity planning, or continuity conversations, I should say, with Derryn Shrosbee from 33.7. We're going to talk about today who needs to, you need to decide on who's in the tent with you in terms of your transition planning. And then we're going to have a piece of the most recent Pests and Predator podcast with Dr. Hector Carcamo at AFC Lethbridge. If you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or of course you can always call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Understanding the challenges you face, Nutrient Ag Solutions works with you to find the right solution every time. Nutrient Ag Solutions is one partner all in. Visit nutrientagsolutions.ca to learn how their offerings work together to support your operation. Joining us right now is Real Agriculture's Kelvin Heppner, who's going to explain everything that how should we view all of this, because there's a lot of angles. Kelvin, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm a little tired. Otherwise, I'm doing well here, Shaun. Yeah, there are a lot of different angles. To me, these results send a lot of different messages. There's conflicting messages coming out of what we're seeing in terms of I know some of these seat count totals aren't completely firmed up, but the Liberals right now at leading in 168 seats, just 4 short of the 172 required for a majority. Conservatives at 144, Bloc 23, NDP down to 7. So I think there's a bit of a bittersweet flavor to these results for all 4 of those major parties.
Bloc underperforms, NDP underperforms, Polyev
but they both carry the balance of power. But they
carry the balance. Yeah. So, and we're gonna have to see how at the time of us recording this, we don't know how there's like upwards of like 20 or 30 ridings that are still really close and still trying to figure it out. But it seems like it's a kind of a a minority is the likely scenario at this point.
Yeah, it looks like, you'd only need 4 seats to change to give the Liberals a majority. But right now it's looking like they have a minority. The Bloc and both the NDP will be likely to be dance partners to get the Liberals over that 172 mark to carry a majority in the House of Commons. So, yeah, for the Liberals, I think huge popular vote that we haven't seen for any party since the 80s. I went back into some of the stats from the past, and we haven't seen a popular vote at 43.5% as of right now. We haven't seen it that high since 1984, I believe it was. We also, but at the same time, the Liberals did not perform as well as some of the seat projections in the last couple of weeks. So, and of course, they'll be disappointed that they didn't actually achieve, or don't appear to have achieved, a majority. The Conservatives actually saw a greater popular vote than they have when they won elections, Shaun, under the Harper government, even greater than the Trudeau Liberals the last in 2015, for example. It's actually the highest popular vote percentage of any party with the word conservative in the name in decades, also going back to the 80s. So, and the Conservatives won something around 20 more seats, I believe, than what they had prior to the election, taking seats from the Liberals and the NDP. So right there, that's a pretty positive message. But then you, of course, can turn it on its head and say they lost an election where they were leading in the polls by more than 20% less than 3 months prior to voting day. And their leader, Pierre Poilievre, has lost his seat in Carleton, and right now they're facing a very, very uncertain future with their leader not having a seat. He's not officially the head of the opposition now, as with this result, And so all kinds of uncertainty regarding the future of the Conservative Party and what their leadership situation is.
Well, so a lot of people will look at, we're going to talk about the polls tomorrow. We got David Coletto from Abacus Data on the show tomorrow. But one thing the pollsters were very right about was basically Liberals had a 2-point advantage. And, how much of the popular vote was incorrect, but that gap, it's just over 2% at this point. Basically the Canadian Shield is somewhat now of a separator in physically and politically. When I see Conservative seats on Vancouver Island, that's a bit of a testament to how much BC moved towards the Conservative camp. Boy, there's a lot of Conservative seats: BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Obviously, the northern regions of both Saskatchewan and Manitoba not going the Conservatives' way, which was expected, or as expected. So we got kind of this political separation now, physically and politically.
Yeah, if we didn't think we had it before, it's amplified even more. And some of this goes together hand in hand, along with that really high popular vote that both the Liberals and Conservatives saw. It's a result of the NDP collapse. And that's where in BC we saw a lot of NDP to Conservative seat switches, including Alistair McGregor, who for a long time was the NDP's lead on agriculture files. And we've had him on the show here, and many people who work with farm groups that visit Ottawa would have met with Alistair in the past. He lost his seat to a Conservative challenger in a three-way split where all three of the top parties received more than 25% of the vote in his riding. The Conservatives came out on top. So, yeah, like you said, Conservative blue across much of the western half of the country, west of the Canadian Shield, parts of rural Ontario as well. There was some switching in the Maritimes in Atlantic Canada, although the Liberals probably recovered more in Atlantic Canada in the polls over the last 3 months than anywhere else in the country, or many other parts of the country. And so, yeah, the future of this discussion about the West's role in this country and whether it feels listened to is certainly something that Carney is going to have to deal with in what looks to be a very tenuous, potentially volatile situation in minority government.
We'll be back with more of my conversation with Kelvin Heppner, breaking down the election result right after this.
Growing corn? With Envita, you can cut your nitrogen and maintain yield, or maintain nitrogen and increase yield. Envita takes nitrogen from the air and turns it into nitrogen for your corn. It provides a right place, right time source of nitrogen to maximize your yield. Farmers who use Envita see healthier plants, bigger cobs, and less tipback. Envita is guaranteed to add more bushels to every treated acre. Start growing with Envita. Visit azotic.com to learn more. That's AZOTIC.com.
My name is Lindsay Smith, and it is time for today's Product Spotlight. Joining me now is Jason Mann. He's the president of Genesis Fertilizers. Let's talk about how the Arctic Gateway route and Genesis Fertilizers, how working together is really helping to hedge Genesis Fertilizers against some of the trade uncertainty that's out there.
If we come up with a supply chain that's outside of North America for our phosphate, presumably we would bypass this tariff threat, first of all. So, as far as supply chain, if we build our own supply chain, our own collaborating with Arctic Gateway Group to have facilities at the Port of Churchill that are dedicated to bringing in phosphate. Now we control our own supply chain. We're not reliant on another provider to get the product into Western Canada. Farmers can take that into their own hands, and we can purchase in advance, bring the product in ahead of the season, and make sure that we have the quantities we need when we need it.
Where can people go if they've still got questions, or if they, of course, want to invest and become involved?
Well, best is always go to the website, genesisfertilizers.com.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. With volatile markets and rising costs, now's your chance to be a part of the solution. It's time to secure your future with Genesis Fertilizers. Gain control and ensure access to locally produced nitrogen. Act now to protect your farm's future for generations. Visit genesisfertilizers.com to learn more. Okay, let's bring him back in. Kelvin Heppner with RealAgriculture. We're talking about the election result from last night. Rural-urban divide feels kind of even starker now, doesn't it? Now, I haven't run the numbers on that, but it just, when I look at the map, it really kind of feels that way.
Yeah. And of course, this is in a situation where Carney and the Liberals have been talking about making big changes. All political parties have been talking about the need to make bold, big actions to get the Canadian economy on a better path. Of course, to respond to the Trump administration and the different threats there. But if these results hold as they stand right now, where the Liberals are short of a majority, they will have very little cover or buffer from being brought down. And so I think, we're in for some interesting times, and I'm not sure that it gives the government the mandate to make these bold decisions. So at least they face the threat of being brought down at every corner. If the Conservatives block an NDP, I guess the block an NDP if they choose to not support them. So that's where we could be in for. This could actually be quite a short-lived minority government in if you look at it from that sense. And I think that is probably going to be a factor in what happens with the Conservative leadership situation too. If Poilievre makes that argument, this government's not going to stand very long. Keep me as leader because I'm ready to go again, kind of thing.
Yeah. What happens to Pierre Poilievre, I think, is a big question on a lot of Canadians' mind. There's a lot of infighting between the Ontario Conservatives, the Ford camp, and the federal Conservatives. There is some factions, and they are not exactly. I don't want to. It's pretty understated how heated it is behind the scenes, and maybe out in the open more and more. That's going to be interesting.
Some of it came out in the open yesterday.
Yeah, go ahead.
Some of it came out in the open yesterday as Jamil Javani, who actually worked in the Ford government in Ontario, is a Conservative candidate in Southern Ontario, and he accused Ford of interfering in the federal Conservatives campaign and getting in their way, and so some of that came to light. Sorry, he
called him a liberal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was pretty strongly worded in terms of pointing the finger at him and saying he was a hype man for the Carney Liberals, and so we'll see where that goes. And of course, a lot of Conservatives across the country feel that Doug Ford is more of a populist, not a conservative principled politician either. And so, but he's won several mandates in a row, and the federal Conservatives have failed to do that. And so, the future direction of the party is fascinating. And of course, the Conservative Party is a coalition of different political ideologies, and it's held for the last couple of decades. But there's certainly some risk here that it doesn't hold, depending on what happens with the leadership situation and the direction the party takes.
As I think back to early December, and I think about on this show and in some speeches, some of the things that I said were, that have proven to be like, boy, I read that wrong. And the greatest of political analysts and pundits and followers got like this reversal for Carney is of historic proportions. As you talked about, a 20-point lead, some of it self-inflicted, most of it because of some of the influence of President Trump, the collapse of the NDP. There's a lot of factors here, but this is 4 months of politics, Kelvin, that we're going to be talking about in Canada for a long time.
Yeah, it's the Trump factor. A lot of people are referring to that, but it's also the fact that Justin Trudeau was pushed off the stage.
That's another variable. Sorry. Yes, thank you.
So many people. Well, no, I'm not. I'm just adding to the discussion here because I think that's one of the things that Conservatives are certainly going to be questioning if they do a debrief in the coming weeks on this whole situation. Maybe they shouldn't have gone so hard after Trudeau, spending big spending big advertising dollars attacking him and getting him pushed out the door. It's certainly the results likely would have been different if it had been Poilievre versus Trudeau atop the ballot last night.
Yeah, reversal from what we saw in the U.S. election, where Trump pushed on Biden, really slaughtered him in that debate. Biden is forced out, but at the end of the day, Trump still won. In this situation, it was a different outcome where you pushed really hard. Trudeau is, as Rosie Barton said last night, knifed, but that was the word that she used, knifed by Chrystia Freeland. And look at this epic turnaround. I'll admit when we're right and claim when we're, knowing it when we're wrong. I can remember asking the RealAg Issues panel several times, why would Carney want this job? Well, I guess we found out.
Well, and you said in speeches in December, Shaun, I remember talking to a university class at University of Manitoba in late January and saying that this scenario wouldn't happen, that there's no way this swing in the polls would happen. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things that we didn't expect to have happen here. And yeah, it's also another big fascinating part of this to me is how sure the leader of the Liberal Party has changed, but the cabinet members are largely all the same behind him. You look at the top staff, the advisors to Mark Carney, it's Jerry Butts, Andrew Bevin, Tom Pitfield. These are guys that were around from day one with Trudeau and were major advisors to Prime Minister Trudeau and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. And here they are working with Carney, and Canadians have felt this is enough of a change, or at least they felt that the circumstances with a different administration south of the border warranted, I guess, giving the Liberals a fourth consecutive mandate, which, again, in Canadian political history, not many parties get the fourth one. There's been quite a few instances of three, but like a good TV show, the seasons after once you get to seasons 9, 10, 11, things start to peter out usually, and the Liberals have countered that trend this week.
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning. A lot of times in Canadian politics, people say, in comparison to the U.S., is that, the U.S. politics is about the leader, right? You vote for the leader. And in Canada, we vote for the party. Do we? Because the change in leadership flipped this, like American style almost. And it kind of, like, you look at the popular vote, and the NDP and the Bloc and where their percentages are, which were like, so the Greens were 1.2, NDP was 6.3, and the Bloc was 6.4. Two-party race. It almost felt like this feels more two-party than I can remember in like a long time.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of that NDP support coalesced around the Liberals, and even the Bloc support went to the Liberals as, again, and I think a lot of this being driven by the Trump factor, and also people on the left side of the spectrum wanting to not have Poilievre be Canada's prime minister. And so, yeah, I think our attention spans these days, Shaun, are so short that the leader is a big part of the party brand, and people get to know the leader. They don't have time to actually get to know, and even then, how well do we really know Mark Carney? We don't know him that well, and especially this version of Mark Carney that repeals the carbon tax versus the Mark Carney that wrote the book about the importance of moving to net zero and all of those types of things, and the one who formed the Net Zero Banking Alliance. And it'll be interesting to see whether the Liberals. So I guess in some ways I'm saying a small C conservative, not somebody that's partisan to the Conservative Party of Canada, should be relatively pleased with what the Conservative Party itself accomplished here in terms of moving the political discourse in Canada, or at least this is a silver lining. The political discourse in Canada moved to the right, and with a focus on economic issues, with a focus on ending the carbon tax, repealing the capital gains tax changes, that type of thing. Those are small C conservative wins, and Carney has moved the Liberal Party in that direction, but does he keep it down that trajectory based on his past and based on all the people around him in their past? Stephen Guilbeault, for example, longtime environment minister, reelected last night handily in his Quebec riding. And so is this a different Liberal Party than we saw for the last decade, or is this quickly going to revert to more of the same? That's a big question, I think, to be determined in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, now Carney's got to come through. How does he deal? Canadians clearly said, hey, we think that Prime Minister Carney would be better in dealing with the trade issues or the political issues with President Trump of the United States. So rubber hits the road now on that. Still think, depending on how long this government's in power, which could be short or it could be the full term, is national unity. I think that may be a bigger challenge for him than the Trump issue. The Trump issue is more, in some ways, I could argue, a little bit more show business, whereas the national unity one is a real crisis he may have to actually deal with. What do you think before we wrap up?
Yeah, exactly, especially with a separatist party in the Bloc Québécois holding the balance of power. Yeah. that's one thing. At points last night, it looked like the Bloc was going to be the only dance partner for the Liberals to get them to majority. The NDP now, with the Liberals getting up to 168 seats, the NDP could put them over the top too. So it's a matter of whether the Liberals and NDP, those few Liberal members, can work together, or whether the Liberals have to work with the Bloc. And that's where the Bloc will always stand up for Quebec's interests over the rest of the country. And I think that's where we get into some heavy unity discussions here in the coming months. Whether it's years, probably more likely months.
And NDP without a leader. Do the Liberals try to coax those a few of those NDP seats across the aisle? That's a possibility to watch out for as well. Hey, Kelvin, thanks a lot. We'll see you on Friday.
Thanks, Shaun.
Hey, we talked about Ag Expert, deep in the fields and deep in the data to back up your decisions on the farm. Get started at agexpert.ca. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
If you grow soy or edible beans in Ontario, you know that Sclerotinia white mold is no joke. Yield loss can be devastating, and timing fungicides can be complicated, but did you know there's a new seed treatment that can help mitigate yield loss? Start the year off with your best foot forward against disease. Ask your seed supplier or local Agri-Mart group to pre-treat your beans with Heads Up. Part of a complete white mold management plan, ask your seed dealer about Heads Up today or visit headsupst.com.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight with Lemken, and we're joined right now by Ivor Bernatsky. Ivor, it is great to chat with you.
It's great to be with you too, Shaun. Spring's here. Things are getting busy.
Yeah, spring is coming here. It's in the air, and a lot of producers are getting itchy to put some seed in the ground. Lemken's got an extremely strong brand in the tillage market globally. Always enjoy our visit at different farm shows across North America, as well as at Agritechnica every 2 years, and really leading the edge when it comes to technology and tillage. Now, one thing is that some people may not be totally aware of, Lemken's made a very strong entry into the seeding market. Talk about that.
Absolutely. And, certainly I have a background on Lemken. It's really unique to be working for a company that's been around for 245 years. It's a 7th generation family owned company based out of Germany that started by making a plow in 1780. And since then, certainly the company has expanded. And so in the 1990s, Lemken came out with the solitaire seeding equipment through acquisition, and then did their own development and engineering. And now that solitaire technology is around the world. There's over 31,000 machines that are out there, have been made and sold since then, but really not well known in North America because we have focused on tillage. The first machines started coming into North America. The tillage machines came in the mid 2000s. And with that, we built out our dealers and our people and our facilities. And we're really holding back a little bit. Some of the machines were a little bit small, a little hard to get people excited about a 4 or 6 meter drill, in Western Canada especially. But things have changed. So we've re-engineered our seeding equipment. So we're now at 9 meters, 29 feet, and as a high speed seeder, we're able to cover the same area as a 60-foot drill. So we're hitting 8 to 10 miles an hour. A 60-foot drill that might be going 4 or 5 miles an hour is going to cover about the same area. So people are open to having that conversation. Then as well, in 2023, Equalizer, a South African planter and seeder manufacturer, joined Lemken and brought in some technology that we didn't have. Planter technology that uses precision planting, and also a disc drill, an air tine drill, which is really disruptive technology, especially for Western Canada, that we've been able to bring in. They were maxed out selling to 8 countries. When we heard of that opportunity across the United States, but also in Western Canada, we really wanted to bring that here because it was a lot more than just a different color of seeder technology. It was totally different, disruptive, innovative technology. That's what farmers need. That's what we're committed to bring.
Yeah. And we've got some great videos on realagriculture.com featuring that Equalizer seeder. So encourage people to check that out. Indeed, I would think, combining the technology that Equalizer has, plus the experience that Lemken has when it comes to tillage, and because they're both in the same area or genre where we're concerned about how do we properly move the soil, put the soil back, and in this case, obviously we're making sure that we're putting a seed in the ground as well. There's got to be a lot of synergies there, so to speak.
Absolutely, and it also opens. It brings us forward as an innovative company that, again, over all of those years, and it's very unique to have a company that has that long of a spectrum of agriculture, in their rearview mirror. And when they look forward, they're looking forward in a similar amount of time too. So we know that it's our responsibility to bring in technology that is useful today, but certainly is a tool that might be used by more in the near future. We have a customer down in Idaho that just won an award for the highest yield spring barley irrigated crop at 201 bushels per acre. That, it started well with that machine, and then it was taken to another level with his agronomy. But, when we're playing in that arena, we know we're bringing something exciting to the marketplace.
Yeah, no, Ivor, is there? How do people find out more information about this Equalizer? Is there demo opportunities? Just the dealer network. Give us more before we conclude.
Absolutely, we're looking for demos. We're running demos all across North America, certainly in Western Canada and Ontario. So farmers can go to lemkendemo.com and request a demo. And if they can't get a demo on their farm, we just signed a partnership with Western Crop Innovations in Lacombe, Alberta. And we're going to be planting 4 different cultivars, over 300 acres there, another 100 acres down in Olds. And we'll be part of their field day on July the 22nd. We'll have our machines there. So we'll have seeded with 3 different types of machine, 4 different crops, and we'll be there to answer questions as well. So lemkendemo.com or that field day, and we can answer a lot of questions, as well as being out at the big farm shows, Ag in Motion, and the crop show in Woodstock.
Great stuff. Looking forward to both of those indeed. Ivor, thanks a lot for joining us here today for this product spotlight with Lemken. Really appreciate it.
Excellent. Thanks, Shaun.
Okay, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, right after this.
Find everything you need for outstanding weed control in your wheat and barley from the cross-spectrum herbicide experts at Corteva. Corteva is proud to offer a wide selection of cross-spectrum herbicides for maximum convenience, effective resistance management, and customized control of your toughest grassy and broadleaf weeds. No matter what kind of weed challenges you're experiencing, we've got the right fit for your farm. Visit corteva.ca to learn more.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. Tracking livestock just got easier. The CLTS movement module records animals moving off premises. Although this is not yet a requirement under regulation, CCIA has streamlined reporting to prepare for future changes to support compliance. Learn more by going to support.canadaid.ca. We're talking today to the CEO and founder of 33.7, Derryn Shrosbee. Derryn, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Shaun. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing really good. Okay, so Derryn, so far we have talked in our series here. We've talked about, finding what exactly is this farm worth? Then we've looked at the question of, I think, a really good one. Are you leaving a legacy or are you creating a liability? Now, there are a lot of ways to describe farm transition planning. Some would call it a circus. So maybe it's apropos that point 3 is who is in the tent with you? Who is in the circus tent with you, Derryn?
Exactly. Who's in the tent? So this is a very poignant question. So the circus is, what is the old analogy? Not my circus, not my monkeys.
Yeah, something like that.
But in this case, it is my circus, and the monkeys I want in the tent are, generally speaking, my family or people that I love. So who's in the tent with you is another way of saying something which accountants and lawyers use a lot of, is family trust. So who's in the tent is, when all is said and done, where is this going? All right. So setting up a tent with the people that you want from a transition standpoint is very, very important. So whether that's on farm and off farm, they can both be in the tent with you. They have different seats in the tent, but they're all in the tent with you. It's not like, the on farm kids are in the trust and the off farm kids are not. That doesn't make sense. We can put everything together. What trusts do are very interesting. A trust in this instance is two different kinds of trusts. One is the 21-year trust, which is standard in Canada. Then there's another one, which is not standard, but way more interesting, and it's called a continuity trust. A continuity trust lasts in perpetuity. It never, ever unwinds. Whereas in Canada, there's a 21-year reset rule, which means the trust rolls every 21 years for various reasons. So there's two trusts. Most people have only ever heard of the 21-year reset trust, right? Most people have never heard of continuity trusts. However, they're becoming more apparent because you have a permanent problem and a permanent solution. The permanent problem is each generation is going to die. And how do we protect the bloodline? Right? The bloodline doesn't reset every 21 years. So you can take capital assets and put those into the 21-year reset trust. But the perpetuity trust takes one asset and one asset only, and that's life insurance. And before everyone pours gasoline on themselves and lights them on fire and runs screaming from the barn because I mentioned the word life insurance and everyone hates those words, there is a very specific purpose for that. So that's a continuity trust. That's forever. We're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss the Rockefeller method versus the Vanderbilts. That's over there. But the 21-year reset trust is more simple, and we can discuss that as well. So that's basically the tent, who's in the tent, and what kind of tent do you want? Are you buying a yurt, or are you just going to buy a standard camping tent? It's up to, or do you want both?
Is it trust for everybody, though? Because a lot of times I think people, I hear this a lot from our audience where it's like, I got to do a trust, should do a trust. And if you ask why, it's like, I don't know, it really seems like a lot of people are doing it because they were at some sort of a seminar.
Yeah, so no, it's not for everyone. Sometimes the tax implication of actually setting up a capital trust, which is for farm like acreage and plant equipment, et cetera, it doesn't work. It mathematically doesn't make sense. So no, trusts are not for everyone. They definitely aren't. However, we're going to go back to part 1 and 2 of our conversation. With the explosion in the value of farmland, there is a lot more money at stake. So let's say you have 4 kids. All right, how do you protect the bloodline? This is tricky. So let's say you have 4 children, and statistically, out of the 4 children, let's say you with easy math again, $10 million. So the farm's worth $10 million. Each kid, you love him equally, gets about $2.5 million. Let's just use that as the macro, right? Stay in the macro with me. Mm-hmm. So out of these 4 children, statistically in Canada, 2 get divorced. So there's matrimonial dispute on 2. If you've put $2.5 million by 4 children, there's your 10 million, right? Mm-hmm. So of these 2 that get divorced, 50% of their assets evaporate. So 1.25. You've just lost $2.5 million to the exiting spouses. So your net worth was 10, now it's 7.5, right? That's tricky. how do you protect matrimonial breakdown from coming off the acreage and coming after your farm? Right? It's okay, you can pay them to leave, but let's not pay them in acreage, because once again, you can't cut the farm up, it's not a pie, right? So if you want to protect your farm and protect your acreage and protect the bloodline and the generational aspect of the farm, a trust can be a useful tool for you to put assets in to protect you from matrimonial breakdown. So from a risk perspective, it's extremely important to think about a trust. It might not work for you, but it's at least to explore the number. Going back to our first part of our conversation, the $10 million example, where you get the $10 million farm, let's see what it costs if your acreage is personally owned to transfer it into a trust. What's that tax bill? And if that tax bill is not too high, how does it protect from matrimonial dispute? Lots of farmers have 8 children, 6 children, etc., etc. It becomes more and more risky the more children you have, just based on matrimonial breakdown. So who's in the tent? What kind of tent? And does it economically make sense to put the tent up to protect the bloodline?
Well, and how you decide who's in the tent, but you also kind of just, we all have different seats, right? So when we go to the circus, we can choose the VIP section. We can sit in the, kind of the general admission, or there's the rafters, maybe some people are stuck behind a pillar. They can see half the show. we kind of, because everyone's not equal in this either, right? In their role on the farm, or because in the worst situations, what happens is, what we can do is the older generation is say, well, Mary over here, she's staying on the farm, she's taken care of, right? As if there's no risk to what Mary is doing, right? She's just agreed to take on the risk. There's some wealth in that, but she's also accepted the risk factor of that, which I think is often ignored. Then you have the maybe off farm. We got Rob and we got Ron, and brothers Rob and Ron have their own lives, and have, maybe one of them is very successful, another one's a dud, but whatever. How we treat them relative to the on farm child, those are things we got to answer too, and not just who's in the tent, but what seats are they in.
Yeah, for sure. So let's assume that you still, Ron and the R's and the Mary are nice people, and the parents will love them, etc., etc. So everyone's in the tent, but to your point, one's behind a bleacher, he can't see much. The other one's got a view of the stage, and then Mary's on stage, and she's farming, taking all the risk. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the risk part, because people overlook that, right? It's not, I'm inheriting just $100 million for nothing. No, I've worked here for 20 years, and I have sleepless nights, and every time it hails, I want to die, et cetera, et cetera. So you're taking on a risk. So I appreciate that. So how do we look at, I think the question that you might be bringing up in a roundabout fashion, and I like the tent, it's very nice, is farm continuity. Like, the continuity is interesting, but how does on-farm versus off-farm work? And estate equalization comes into that. So what does the estate equalization look like in this? So you've got, was it Rob and Ron, right?
Rob and Ron, yeah.
So Rob and Ron are the off-farm boys. How do they get paid? Because mom and dad still love them. They obviously love Mary more because she's on farm. I'm kidding. I'm just,
what way to feed the stereotype there. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. The stereotype there. So the on farm, Mary gets the farm. Happy days. We understand that. Farm is not a pie. Can't cut it up. How do we do estate equalization where Rob and Ron get something? They're not going to get 2/3 of the value, because the farm will implode, right? But they've got to get something. So what is fair? Don't forget that if you look at it from a continuity perspective, your children, what they get is a bonus. It's not a birthright. Right? It's a bonus. As a parent, if you give your children money or acreage, etc., that's because A, they earned it, and B, because it's a bonus. If your career plan is me dying, that's not good, right? You can't have that. So if Ron and Rob are duds and they have that as a career plan, that's going to end poorly. But let's assume they don't. So how do we estate equalize? So let's say the farm, once again, is $10 million. Mary gets the $10 million farm. How much are Rob and Ron going to get? What do you think is fair, Shaun?
Well, a lot of times people would handle that through life insurance.
Yep.
What they get, right?
Yes, that's the easiest. The easiest way to do it is through life insurance. So mom and dad would take out a life insurance policy. Let's say the death benefit is $1 million, right? And then $1 million each. So it's a $2 million policy for the death benefit. And when they die, Rob and Ron get $1 million each. Mary gets the farm. Happy days. Now, we know that that is a easy and wonderful way to estate equalize. But every single farmer I speak to comes to me and says, but the sticker, the ticket is like, let's say it's $100,000 a year. Like it's a big number. It's $100,000, right? And they're like, now I have to choose. Now they have a thing called opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is, do I choose continuity planning, which is estate equalization, which looks after my entire family, different seats, or in the tent? These are the people I love and I want to take care of them. Or there's opportunity. Or do I go out and buy a new header for the combine? I can't do both because I don't have enough resources.
Yeah.
So what does every farmer choose?
Equal. I don't know.
No, they choose the combine header. They buy a new header for the combine.
Yeah.
They just do because that's what farmers do.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're stuck in a quandary here. Well, you know you need the equalization, but you also need stuff for the farm.
Yeah.
So over the last 100 years, people have had to choose. However, now they don't have to choose. They can do both. Because what we can do is we can do the insurance. So let's say it's $100,000 premium, send that to a life insurance company. We can go to a bank or a credit union and borrow back the $100,000. So we borrow back the $100,000. We go and buy the header for the combine, and then we write off the interest expense on the loan. Right? So now you still got your new header, so you're making more money on your canola or whatever the case may be, and you've got your continuity plan. So for the first time in history, there is no opportunity cost of dollars because you're using $1 twice. You've got your continuity plan in place, which means the farm moves to Mary and Rob and Ron get some cash. So everyone's happy and they still have supper together. And yet I haven't reduced the liquidity of your farm because you still have the $100,000 back to reuse for productive purposes on the farm. So that is a very elegant solution to cleaning up continuity and estate equalization, as well as to continue the farming operation unhindered.
Don't put your yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations. Imitator brands just can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca.
Right now, people in agriculture and food are facing challenges that can feel overwhelming. If you need to talk, access the National Farm Crisis Line at 1-866-FARMS-01. That's 1-866-327-6701. It's 24/7 confidential help when you need it. Farm Credit Canada also has tools to support your long-term mental health. Learn more and access the crisis line at fcc.ca/wellness.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
For the past 6 years, we've been doing the Pests and Predator podcast, where I talk to entomologists about a number of issues around what's happening in the canopy with insects and bugs and predators and pests and all those kinds of things. It is powered by the WGRF and Field Heroes. You can find out more by going to fieldheroes.ca. Joining us right now, based out of Lethbridge, it is Dr. Hector Carcamo. Dr. Carcamo, it is great to chat with you.
Great to talk to you too, Shaun. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. When I look at kind of we were chatting before we started record here, should Western Canada introduce a new wasp from Europe to boost pest control, cut pesticide use, and strengthen the agroecosystem resilience? And this is something that you've been doing a lot of work on. I guess to start off, let's focus on the lygus bugs part first. What are lygus bugs, and how serious of a pest are they here in 2025?
Yes, lygus bugs are a very interesting and complex pest to study, and it's a fascinating for entomologists to tackle. It's complex in more than one way because they are actually a complex of species. There's at least 4 species of lygus that make up the pest complex. And the other interesting thing about them is that they are native species. They have always been here before we started agriculture. And the other fascinating thing is that they are very generalist as far as their feeding habits. They don't really care what you present to them. They will eat everything that produces a bud and a flower and a nice juicy seed. So they will eat everything. They even eat cereals, although it's not their favorite food. So they're very, very generalist. So they do represent a major threat to a lot of crops.
Like, is it needed for us to use some sort of form of biological control with an exotic pest like this wasp?
That's I guess that's the $1 million question. Do we need an extra wasp to control it? And we are wrestling with this question. I have to confess to you that I am still thinking about it and trying to read more, understand more, interpret the data that we have, and also in some ways we have to kind of go with your instinct to some extent. And I know this doesn't sound good for scientists to say this, but we don't have all the data in front of us, and maybe we can never get all the data that we would like to have. So at some point we're going to have to make an educated guess and go with it. So do we need another wasp? And the question is, well, it's complicated. I used to be 100% convinced that yes, the answer to that question was yes. We do need another wasp to help us to manage lygus bugs. And I wasn't alone. We had, I don't know, a dozen scientists throughout Canada, in Eastern Canada, in Western Canada, studying lygus and looking at the possibility of relocating this parasitoid, which, by the way, this wasp called Peristinus digonurus, sorry, it doesn't have a common name. It's from Europe, but our American friends, they introduced it into the U.S. in the Northeast. They released it there in the late 70s, 80s. It became established. It did a great job controlling lygus bugs there. And the wasp actually migrated to Canada on its own without anybody moving it around. It just by itself. It moved into Quebec, Ontario, and it was established there. And it was kind of a funny story. Scientists there were actually studying the possibility of relocating it from the U.S. to Canada. Right. And while they were doing all the lab studies and thinking about it and doing the baseline data, which is good, we need to get baseline information on what we have. Baseline information means getting the data, the information on the native species that we have here in terms of the lygus bugs, because there are more than pest lygus species. Also, there are lygus that are just eating other plants. They're not pests, and we don't want to have a major impact on them. And there are also native wasps that attack lygus bugs. In Quebec, they have something called Lyophron and also native Peristinus. Anyway, the ecologists there, entomologists there were doing all these studies, to consider the introduction of Peristinus digonurus. And it came to the back door and it got established there. So now we have it there in Eastern Canada also. So I used to be convinced by themselves that yes, we do need an extra wasp because the ones that we have in Western Canada are not doing the job. But in 2021, we had that huge heat dome, and we had lygus outbreaks everywhere. We had an explosion of lygus bugs almost in every crop, from greenhouses in Quebec, plantations of horticultural crops everywhere, and field crops here. Lygus were everywhere. So after that year, we actually have found that one of the native Peristina species that we have in Alberta, in the prairies in Western Canada, called Peristinus howardi or howardi.
Yeah,
that species now has found the lygus in canola even and in every crop, and it seems to be attacking them there now. at fairly good rates. It used to be that we would find almost 0% parasitism of lygus in canola before 2021. And we've been doing these studies for the last 20 years. And now, after that huge explosion of lygus bugs everywhere, it looks like the parasitoids finally found them and have moved into these crops. So I am not entirely sure now that we do need this wasp. I'm still leaning towards relocating it, because despite the effect of this native wasp, the lygus are still a pest, and people are still spraying a lot of insecticides for lygus in canola, even though we have this. But this is a fairly new event that we're witnessing now. So perhaps we need to wait a couple more years and see if this Pericillum howarda is going to be a permanent feature of the assembly of insects. And it might be that it may help us to control it without needing to relocate these exotic species.
So I assume one of the strategies here, Dr. Carcamo, is to enhance the populations of the native natural enemies of the lygus bug. Are there things that we can do to build those populations and maybe their aggressiveness on the lygus bug?
Yes, there are things that we can do to conserve natural enemies. And this strategy applies to not just natural enemies like predators and parasitoids, but also pollinators and insects that help us recycle nutrients to maintain a diverse community of insects and spiders, arthropods. And one thing that I like to mention very often is to follow economic thresholds. We spend a lot of time and a lot of effort developing, validating, coming up with thresholds that guide producers to spray insecticide only when they absolutely have to spray them. That's one kind of a relatively easy thing that growers can do. If you become familiar with the beneficial insects, so when you take your sweep sample, you get your 10 sweeps and you count all the lygus and the aphids and the pests. Also pay attention to the beneficial insects that you have in that sweep net, because it could be, and yes, we still have a lot of work to do to get the exact relationships of how many ladybird beetles or how many friendly insects you need in that sweep net to control the pest. But if you see a lot of them, maybe you don't need to spray for lygus bugs or the pest, even if the numbers are close to threshold. So that's one thing you can do.
We've been talking to Dr. Hector Carcamo from AFC Lethbridge for the latest episode of the Pest and Predator podcast. Highly encourage you to go to RealAgriculture.com and listen to the entire episode. Very interesting about whether or not Canada should make the decision to have biological control. Essentially, release a European wasp into the environment to try to tackle lygus bugs. Very fascinating, and really want to thank WGRF and Field Heroes for their support for the Pest and Predator podcast. Now, what are your thoughts on what you heard today? We talked to Derryn Shrosbee from 33.7 about who needs to be in the tent when it comes to your continuity conversation. Or what do you think about the election result last night? You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio. Chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.